The Unwanted. This story began with the quiet click of a door. Not a loud argument, not the sound of breaking dishes, but a muffled sound that 11-year-old Artyom heard from behind his bedroom door. It was the sound of a family breaking. His world, which had been cracking at the seams for a long time, finally collapsed that evening. His parents, exhausted by their wars, presented him with an ultimatum no child should ever hear. Who do you want to live with? Artyom couldn't choose, so they chose for him. They chose themselves. His father moved to another city to a new family, his mother to a new life where there was no place for painful memories in the form of a son. Artyom was left with his grandmother, a stern but infinitely loving woman. Her small apartment smelled of medicine and cabbage pies. It was here, listening to the ticking of an old clock, that the boy made a vow to himself. He would become so significant, so renowned, so needed, that his absence from their lives would hurt them every single day. And he began to work. Study became his weapon and his shield. While his classmates hung out, he solved math problems. While they watched movies, he memorized English vocabulary. He replaced tears with stubbornness, resentment with ambition. His grandmother, straining her pension, paid for his extra courses, and he, in return, brought home nothing but straight A's. He got into the best university in the country for information technology. His thesis project was bought for a huge sum by a large corporation. At 25, he founded his first startup, a platform for remote education. It became incredibly popular, especially during the pandemic. By 30, Artyom, now Mr. Artem Sergeyevich, was a millionaire. His photo graced the covers of Forbes, and he was quoted in business schools. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted. He had a house with panoramic windows, expensive cars, and respect. But at night, he still woke up as that same little boy who heard that quiet click of the door. The summit had been conquered, but it was lonely. And the more he had, the more acutely he felt that very hole, the starting point of his journey, the abandoned boy. At 40, he gave an order to his personal assistant: find them. A team of the best investigators began the search. They found his father first. He lived in the city he had left for all those years ago. Artyom flew to him with a stony face, rehearsing phrases full of reproach in his head. But the meeting was different. The door was opened by an elderly, tired woman, his second wife. In a small apartment that smelled of boiled potatoes, a feeble old man with an empty gaze sat in front of a TV. This was his father. He had a severe form of dementia. He didn't remember his current wife, let alone his son from his first marriage. He lived in some distant past where there were no mistakes, no betrayals. There was no one to blame. Artyom left an envelope with money and walked away silently. His triumph was useless here. A week later, they found his mother. She lived in a neighboring town, in an ordinary concrete apartment building. Artyom's heart beat faster. He went alone, without assistance, in a simple rental car. He walked up a somewhat dirty stairwell that smelled of cats and old plaster. His hand trembled before he pressed the doorbell. She opened the door. Aged, with gray hair, wearing a simple house robe. But the eyes were the same. She looked at the well-dressed stranger with a question. "Mom," he said, and his voice, usually firm and confident, trembled. "It's me, Artyom." She peered. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with tears. She didn't pretend she didn't recognize him. "Come in," she whispered. The apartment was modest but cozy. On the walls were photographs, and in many of them, he was there. As a baby, a schoolboy, a student. Magazine clippings of his interviews, computer-printed photos from business forums. Where, how? He didn't understand. "The 9th of July 2025, 1441. I always kept track of you," she said quietly, handing him tea. "From the very beginning. I was proud of you. Every success of yours, it was my little success too. I knew you had become a great man." Rage boiled up in Artyom's chest. "Why?" burst out of him. "Why didn't you find me yourself? When I was nobody. When I was 11, 16, 20. Why were you proud of me in secret, looking at these pictures, but you never once called?" His mother lowered her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I was ashamed, son. So very ashamed. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I thought my presence would only remind you of it. That you hated me. That I would ruin your path. My quiet pride and my repentance were enough for me. I had no right to ask for anything more." Artyom looked at this fragile woman, at her museum room dedicated to him, the unwanted son. He had waited for this meeting for 30 years, ready to show them all how significant he had become. He had expected his success to be his revenge. But it turned out his mother hadn't been hiding from his success all these years. She had been hiding from his pain. And his triumph hadn't been a punishment for her. It had been her quiet, secret solace. He didn't hug her. The wound was too fresh. But he didn't leave. He finished his tea and said, "I'll call." And for the first time in 30 years, he saw in her eyes not guilt, not secret pride, but a weak, timid ray of hope. He walked out to the street, to his ordinary rental car, no longer Artem Sergeyevich, the successful magnate, but just Artyom, the boy who had finally gotten an answer. And that answer brought him no joy, no satisfaction. But it gave him something much more important, the possibility to start a new story. Not from a place of resentment, but from understanding. A story where, perhaps someday, there might even be room for forgiveness.